The moment Ronan Vega pushed open his barn door that frost-bitten March morning, he knew his carefully ordered world was about to shatter like thin ice underfoot. Steam rose from his coffee mug as he stepped into the familiar darkness, expecting nothing more than the soft nickering of his horses and the rustle of hay settling after winter's long grip. Instead, he found a pair of startled green eyes staring back at him from the hayloft. Wild as a cornered fox, fierce as summer lightning. The girl couldn't have been more than 17, wrapped in what looked like every scrap of fabric she could find, her dark hair tangled with bits of straw. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then she scrambled backward like a creature unused to human contact, pressing herself against the weathered boards. "Easy there," Ronan said, his voice carrying the same gentle cadence he used with spooked horses. He set his mug down slowly, hands visible. "I'm not fixing to hurt you." 3 years of raising his daughter, Maisie, alone had taught him patience. But this was different. This girl looked like she'd been carved from winter itself, all sharp angles and desperate hunger. How long had she been living in his barn? How had he missed the signs? "You been here long?" he asked. She didn't answer, just watched him with those feral eyes. Her lips were chapped, her cheeks hollow. Ronan's chest tightened with recognition. He'd worn that same look of cornered desperation once, when Maisie's mother had left them, with nothing but debt and broken promises. "Name's Ronan," he tried again. "This here's my land. But that don't mean you got to run. Just means we need to talk." The girl's voice came out as rough as bark. "Mira." "Mira." He tested the name, found. It suited her wild beauty. Pretty name for a ghost. A flicker of something, humor, maybe pride, crossed her features before the walls went back up. "Ain't no ghost. Could have fooled me. Been wondering why my horses seemed so calm lately, why there was always fresh water in their troughs come morning." Ronan moved closer to the ladder, slow and deliberate. "Good thing you done, caring for them." Her chin lifted with defiance. "Didn't ask for nothing in return." "No, I reckon you didn't." He studied her makeshift nest among the hay bales, a thin blanket, a small satchel, a book with a cracked spine. Pride and desperation warring in equal measure. "Question is, what you running from that's worse than freezing to death in a stranger's barn?" The sound of hoofbeats outside made them both freeze. Myra's eyes went wide with panic, and she pressed deeper into the shadows. Through the gaps in the barn walls, Ronan glimpsed riders approaching. 3 men in dark coats, their faces grim as winter storms. "You know them?" he asked quietly. Myra's nod was barely visible, but the terror in her eyes told him everything. These weren't men looking for a lost girl. They were hunters tracking prey. The lead rider called out. "Morning, Vega." "Sheriff Wade Kingsley. Got business to discuss." Ronan recognized the voice, though Kingsley had only held the badge for 6 months. The man had a reputation for asking questions first and sorting out the truth later, if at all. Whatever trouble Mira had found herself in, involving the law might make things worse before they got better. "Stay quiet," Ronan murmured to the girl, then stepped outside to face the riders. Wade Kingsley sat his horse like a man comfortable with authority, his star catching the weak morning sun. The 2 men flanking him wore the hard faces of bounty hunters, cold eyes and hands that rested easy on their gun butts. "Sheriff," Ronan nodded, keeping his voice steady. "Little early for a social call." "Tracking a runaway," Kingsley said without preamble. "Girl about 17, dark hair, green eyes. Goes by Mira Travers. Her guardian's offering a substantial reward for her safe return." Guardian. The word sat wrong in Ronan's mouth. In his experience, guardians didn't usually require bounty hunters to retrieve their charges. "Haven't seen hide nor hair of any girl," he said, which was technically true. He'd seen plenty of both. "Just not running loose on his property." One of the bounty hunters, a lean man with a scar along his jaw, spoke up. "Mind if we take a look around? Girl's been missing 3 months. Trail's gone cold, but we got word she might have headed this direction." Ronan's hand moved instinctively to the rifle leaning against the barn wall. "I mind plenty. This is private property, and I got a young daughter sleeping in the house. Don't take kindly to armed strangers poking around without proper cause." Kingsley's eyes narrowed. "Could get a warrant. Could try." Ronan met his stare without flinching. "Judge Morrison's particular about his warrants, though. Likes to see evidence before he signs papers." The scarred bounty hunter shifted in his saddle, and Ronan caught the subtle movement of his hand toward his gun. But Kingsley held up a restraining gesture. "No need for trouble," the sheriff said. "But if you do see this girl, you'd be wise to remember there's good money in returning lost property to its rightful owner." Property. Another word that left a bitter taste. "I'll keep that in mind," Ronan said. The riders wheeled their horses and headed toward the main road, but the scarred man looked back once, a glance that promised this wasn't over. Ronan waited until they disappeared behind the ridge before returning to the barn. Mira had climbed down from the loft and stood near the door, her face pale as moonlight. "They're hunting you like an animal," he said. "Ain't the first time." Her voice carried a weariness that belonged on someone 3 times her age. "This guardian of yours ain't my guardian." The words came out sharp as broken glass. "Knox Greer bought my debt when my pa died. Said I belonged to him now, same as livestock. Said he'd teach me my place." The implications hit Ronan like a physical blow. He'd heard whispers about men like Greer, wealthy ranchers who treated women and girls like property to be owned and used. The kind of men who hired bounty hunters instead of sheriffs when their property ran away. "How long you been running?" "Since Christmas Eve." Myra's laugh held no humor. Seemed fitting, running away on the night of miracles. 3 months. 3 months she'd survived on her own in the dead of winter and somehow found her way to his barn. To safety, if he chose to offer it. But safety came with a price. Harboring a runaway would put him at odds with the law, with powerful men like Greer. It would put Maisie at risk, and yet, looking at Myra's defiant stance, her chin raised despite the fear in her eyes, Ronan found himself remembering another desperate soul who'd once needed shelter from a storm. The barn cat, Duchess, emerged from her hiding spot and wound around Myra's legs. The girl's face softened as she knelt to scratch behind the cat's ears, and for a moment, Ronan glimpsed the young woman she might have been in different circumstances. But in the distance, the sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls. Different riders, moving fast and purposeful through the morning mist. The new riders weren't bounty hunters. They were neighbors, and that somehow made everything more complicated. Eloan Bishop dismounted first, her practical riding dress dusty from the morning's journey. Behind her came Holden Baxter, the town's doctor, his medical bag secured to his saddle. Both wore expressions of grim purpose that made Ronan's stomach clench. "Ronan," Eloan called, her voice carrying the authority of a woman who'd run her own ranch since her husband's death 5 years prior. "We need to talk." Mira had already melted back into the barn's shadows, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd learned to become invisible. Ronan positioned himself in the doorway, casual as he could manage while blocking their view inside. "Morning, Eloan." "Document." He tipped his hat. "What brings you out this way so early?" "Same thing that brought Wade Kingsley, I'd wager." Eloan's blue eyes were sharp as winter steel. "Girl's got half the territory stirred up. Knox Greer's offering $500 for her return." Holden Baxter stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concern. "Ronan, if you've seen this girl, Mira Travers, she needs medical attention. Been living rough for months. Could be sick, injured. Won't survive much longer without help." The genuine worry in the doctor's voice made Ronan's decision easier. These weren't enemies. They were people who might understand why a man would risk everything to protect someone helpless. "She's here," he said simply. DeLoan's eyebrows rose. "You're harboring a fugitive?" "I'm offering shelter to a scared girl." Ronan's voice carried steel now. "There's a difference." "Mira," Doc Baxter called gently toward the barn. "I'm a doctor. I'd like to make sure you're all right. No one's going to force you to go anywhere." A long moment passed before Mira emerged, Duchess still twined around her ankles. In the morning light, her condition was even more apparent. The hollow cheeks, the careful way she moved, the clothes that hung loose on her too thin frame. "Child," Eloan breathed, and all the rancher's hardness melted from her face. "How long since you've had a proper meal?" Myra's chin lifted with pride. "I manage fine." "I'm sure you do," Doc Baxter said kindly, setting down his bag. "But managing and thriving are different things." "May I?" He approached slowly, hands visible, much as Ronan had done earlier. When Mira didn't retreat, he gently checked her pulse, looked at her eyes, noted the way she favored her left side. "Ribs?" she admitted when he pressed carefully. Horse kicked. Me last month. Mostly healed now. Mostly isn't good enough. The doctor's voice carried the gentle authority of a man who'd seen too much suffering. You need rest, regular meals, proper care. And you need to stay away from Knox Greer, Eloan added flatly. That man's poison in a fancy suit. Myra's eyes went wide. You know about. No, he's got half the territory scared of crossing him. No, he's got judges and lawmen in his pocket. And I know a girl don't run away in winter unless what she's running from is worse than death. Eloan's voice dropped to something dangerous. Question is, what are we going to do about it? The sound of a child's laughter drifted from the house, followed by a young voice calling, Papa? Breakfast? Myra's head turned toward the sound, something wistful crossing her features. Your daughter? Maisie. She's 8. Ronan felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with being the sole protector of something precious. Lost her mama when she was 5. I'm sorry, Mira said, and the genuine sympathy in her voice reminded him how young she was beneath all that hard-won survival instinct. Papa's probably making eggs again, came Maisie's voice, closer now. He burns them every time, but I pretend. They taste good. Despite everything, Myra's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Smart girl. The smartest. Ronan looked between Eloan and Doc Baxter, weighing his options. She can't stay in the barn. Not with Kingsley and those bounty hunters sniffing around. Bring her to my place, Eloan said without hesitation. Got plenty of room, and my ranch hands know how to keep their mouths shut. Knox Greer's got eyes everywhere, Doc Baxter warned. Even good people can be bought or threatened. Then what do you suggest? Ronan asked, before anyone could answer. Maisie appeared around the corner of the barn, her dark curls escaping from their braids, her face bright with curiosity. She took in the scene, the adults standing in serious conversation, the strange girl with straw in her hair, and walked directly to Mira. Are you hungry? She asked with the straightforward kindness of childhood. Papa made extra pancakes, and they're only a little burned. Mira knelt to Maisie's eye level, something soft entering her expression. What's your name, little miss? Maisie Rose Vega. Papa says the rose part is from my mama, 'cause she loved flowers. Maisie studied Mira with frank interest. You look like you haven't eaten in forever. Mama used to say that was the worst kind of hurt. The simplicity of the child's observation hit like a physical blow. Here was truth without politics, kindness without agenda. I am a mite hungry, Mira admitted. Then you should come eat with us. Maisie took Myra's hand with the easy acceptance of a child who hadn't yet learned to fear strangers. Papa makes terrible coffee, but I know how to make good tea. Ronan felt something shift inside his chest, a door opening that he'd kept locked since his wife's death. The sight of Maisie leading Mira toward the house, chattering about pancakes and the new kittens in the stable, stirred something he'd thought buried forever. Ronan, Eloan's voice called him back to the moment. You can't keep her here permanently. Greer won't give up, and Kingsley's weak enough to be bought. This'll come to a head sooner rather than later. I know. He watched Mira pause at the house's threshold, looking back at him with a question in her eyes. He nodded, and she disappeared inside with Maisie. But maybe we can buy time to find another solution. Doc Baxter shouldered his bag. There might be legal options. If we could prove Greer's holding her against her will, treating her as property rather than a ward. Prove it to who? Eloan snorted. Half the territory's afraid of the man, and the other half owes him money. Then we make our own justice, Ronan said quietly. Both his visitors turned to stare at him. There was something in his voice they hadn't heard before, something that spoke of a man pushed past his breaking point. Careful, Ronan, Eloan warned. Start talking like that, and you'll have bigger problems than harboring a runaway. From inside the house came the sound of Maisie's delighted laughter, followed by a softer sound that might have been Mira joining in. The sound of healing, of hope taking root in barren ground. Maybe, Ronan said, but some things are worth the risk. But across the valley, a lone rider sat motionless on the ridge, watching the Vega ranch through a spyglass. And the morning sun glinted off the silver badge pinned to his chest. The pancakes were perfect, golden brown and light as morning clouds. Mira ate them slowly, savoring each bite while Maisie chattered about her lessons and the baby calves in the south pasture. Ronan watched from across the kitchen table, something warm and dangerous growing in his chest as he witnessed this simple domestic scene. When had his house last held such easy laughter? When had breakfast felt like more than just fuel for another day's work? Miss Mira knows lots of stories, Maisie announced, syrup glistening on her chin. She told me about the constellation that looks like a dancing lady. Andromeda, Mira said, softly. My pa taught me the stars before. She let the sentence trail off, but Ronan heard the grief beneath it. Your pa sounds like he was a good man, he offered. He was. Her green eyes met his across the table. Lost everything to bad. Weather and worse debts. When he died, Knox Greer came calling with papers saying I belonged to him now. Payment for what pa owed. The casual brutality of it made Ronan's hands clench into fists. No person belongs to another. Not anymore. Tell that to the law. Bitterness crept into her voice. Judge Morrison signed the papers himself. Said it was better than the poorhouse. Maisie looked between them with the sharp intuition of childhood. Are you going to stay with us, Miss Mira? We got an extra room upstairs, and Papa could teach you to ride our gentle horses. Before Mira could answer, the sound of hoofbeats echoed from the yard. Not the cautious approach of morning visitors, but the confident thunder of men who expected to be obeyed. Through the window, Ronan saw them. Knox Greer himself, flanked by 4 riders including Sheriff Kingsley and the scarred bounty hunter from earlier. Upstairs, Ronan said quietly to Mira. Now. But it was too late. Knox Greer's voice boomed. Across the yard, Vega, send out my property, and we'll call this even. Mira had gone pale as winter frost, but she stood with her chin raised. I won't hide anymore. I won't let you face trouble because of me. Like hell. Ronan moved to the gun rack by the door, his Winchester feeling solid and familiar in his hands. Maisie, go to your room and stay there. No matter what you hear. Papa, go. His voice brooked no argument, and Maisie scampered up the stairs with one frightened look back. Knox Greer dismounted with the fluid grace of a man comfortable with power. He was younger than Ronan had expected, maybe 40, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes like chips of winter sky. Handsome in the way that drew women and intimidated men, but something cold lived behind that charm. Mr. Vega, Greer called, his voice carrying the refined accent of Eastern education. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Ronan stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Don't see any livestock missing from your spread. Clever. Greer's smile was sharp as a blade. But we both know I'm not talking about cattle. Mira Travers is legally bound to my custody. Harboring her makes you complicit in theft. Funny how you need bounty hunters to retrieve a ward, Ronan observed. Most guardians just ask nicely. Greer's eyes hardened. Most wards don't bite the hand that feeds them. The girl needs discipline, structure. I provide both. What kind of structure requires a girl to run away in winter? The words came from behind Ronan. Mira had emerged from the house. Her fear transformed into something fierce and wild. What kind of discipline leaves bruises shaped like handprints? Careful, girl. Greer's voice dropped to something silky. And dangerous. Spreading lies about your betters can land you in worse trouble than running away. Betters. Fire flashed in Myra's eyes. You're nothing but a well-dressed snake who thinks money gives you the right to own people. The scarred bounty hunter's hand moved to his gun, but Greer held up a restraining gesture. His attention fixed on Mira with the intensity of a cat watching a mouse. You've grown bold, hiding behind this rancher's skirts, he said. But he can't protect you forever. The law is on my side, girl. Judge Morrison signed those papers in good faith. Morrison's in your pocket, Mira shot back. Just like half the territory. Business is business. Greer shrugged elegantly. I offered your father a loan when the banks wouldn't touch him. When he defaulted, I took collateral. You. She's not collateral, Ronan said, his voice deadly quiet. She's a human being. She's chattel, property, and I've come to collect what's mine. Greer's mask of civility began to slip, revealing something ugly beneath. Sheriff, I believe you have a warrant. Wade Kingsley looked uncomfortable as he pulled a folded paper from his coat. Court order for the return of Mira Travers to her legal guardian. Sorry, Ronan, but the law's the law. Whose law? The voice came from the road, a lone bishop, mounted on her black stallion with Doc Baxter beside her. Behind them rode 3 of her ranch hands, all armed and alert. Knox Greer's law? Or the territories? Greer's jaw tightened. Mrs. Bishop. How unexpected. Not really. Alohan's smile was sharp as winter wind. Word travels fast when a man brings bounty hunters onto decent folks' land. Makes neighbors nervous. This is none of your concern, woman. Wrong answer. Alohan's voice could have frozen hell itself. Threatening my neighbors makes it very much my concern, and I'm not the only one who feels that way. As if summoned by her words, more riders appeared on the surrounding ridges. Ranchers, cowhands, townspeople. Not an army, but enough to make Knox Greer's men shift nervously in their saddles. You're making a mistake, Greer said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. All of you. I have the law on my side. You have papers signed by a corrupt judge, Doc Baxter said quietly. That's not the same thing. And you have witnesses now, added a new voice. Anna East Covington stepped into view from behind the barn, her reporter's notebook in hand. The territorial newspaper's most fearless journalist had somehow materialized like morning mist. Interesting story you're writing here, Mr. Greer. Man claims ownership of 17-year-old girl. Brings bounty hunters to retrieve her. Threatens violence when decent folk object. Greer's face went white, then red. You wouldn't dare print. Try me. Anaisa's pen was poised over paper. Unless, of course, you'd like to explain to my readers exactly what kind of discipline requires a young woman to flee into winter rather than endure it. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. You could almost taste the violence hanging in the air, the way it crackled between the two sides like lightning before a storm. Then Mira stepped forward, moving past Ronan despite his restraining hand on her arm. She looked directly at Knox Greer, and when she spoke, her voice carried the quiet strength of someone who'd found her ground at last. I'll make you a bargain, she said. One that even a snake like you might find interesting. Greer's eyebrows rose. I'm listening. I'll come back with you, Mira continued, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from Ronan and Maisie's cry of protest from the upstairs window. But not as your property. As your employee. Legal wages, legal contract, witnessed. By these good people. And if I find the conditions unsuitable, I'm free to leave with 2 weeks' notice. Mira, no, Ronan started, but she silenced him with a look. It's the only way, she said softly. You have Maisie to think about. I won't let my troubles destroy your family. Knox Greer studied her with predatory interest, clearly weighing his options. Around them, the assembled crowd waited in tense silence. But what none of them saw was the figure crouched in the shadows of the old oak tree, close enough to hear every word, and the glint of metal as they raised a rifle toward Myra's heart. Ronan saw the rifle barrel glint in the oak shadow a heartbeat before the shot rang out. Down. He tackled Mira to the porch boards as splinters exploded from the post where her head had been. The bullet's whine split the morning air, followed by the crack of gunfire as both sides reached for their weapons. Kira. Knox Greer's voice carried fury and recognition. Stand down. From the oak tree's shelter, a woman's voice answered, cold as December wind. She's mine to kill, Knox. You promised me that much. Kira Sloan stepped into view, and Ronan felt his blood turn to ice water. He knew that name, that face, scarred by smallpox, twisted by years of hatred. She'd been Knox Greer's first ward, taken when she was barely 16. The story said she'd learned to survive by becoming more vicious than her captor, eventually earning her place as his enforcer. The girl offered terms, Greer called. His earlier composure shattered. Stand down, Kira. That's an order. Your orders don't mean spit to me anymore. Kira's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Not after what you promised me. Said I could have her when you were done playing. Well, I'm tired of waiting. Mira pressed closer to Ronan behind the porch rail, her breath coming in quick gasps. She's the one, she whispered. The one who taught me what would happen if I stayed. Showed me the scars he'd given her, the things she'd had to do to survive. Understanding crashed over Ronan like a cold wave. Kira Sloan wasn't just Greer's enforcer. She was his previous victim, broken and remade into something terrible. And she saw Mira as competition, a younger version of herself who might steal whatever twisted affection she'd managed to earn. Kira, Mira called out, her voice carrying across the yard. You don't have to do this. We're not enemies. Like, hell we're not. Another shot rang out, this one chipping bark from the porch rail. You think you're special? Think you're different? I thought that too, once upon a time. Doc Baxter had taken cover behind his horse, but his voice carried clear. Miss Sloane, you're hurt. Let me help you. This doesn't have to end in blood. It ended in blood the day Knox Greer bought my pa's debts. Kira's voice cracked with old pain. Only question now is whose blood gets spilled. Ronan caught Aloan's eye across the yard. She nodded grimly and began signaling her men to flank around, behind the oak. But Kira had chosen her position well. She could see anyone trying to approach, and her rifle commanded the entire yard. What do you want? Knox Greer demanded, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that might have been fear. Name your price, Kira. Money, land, whatever you need. What I want. Kira's laugh turned wild, desperate. I want to be 16 again. I want my pa alive. I want to forget the feel of your hands, the sound of your voice whispering lies about protection and care. Her voice dropped to something venomous. Since I can't have those things, I'll settle for watching her die. From the upstairs window came Maisie's frightened voice. Papa, stay inside, sweetheart. Ronan called back, his heart hammering against his ribs. His daughter was safe for now, but if this turned into a running battle, Sheriff Kingsley had drawn his weapon but looked lost, uncertain which way his loyalties should point. The bounty hunters flanked Knox Greer, but their eyes kept darting between the hidden sniper and the armed ranchers surrounding them. Then Mira did something that stopped everyone's heart. She stood up. No, Ronan grabbed for her, but she was already moving, stepping into the open yard with her hands raised. I hear you, Kira, she called out. I hear your pain, but killing me won't heal it. Won't bring back what he stole from you. Might make me feel better, though. But something in Kira's voice had changed, uncertainty creeping in where there'd been only rage before. For how long? Mira took another step forward. An hour? A day? Then what? You'll still be broken. Still be alone. Still be carrying his poison in your heart. Shut up. The rifle cracked again, but the shot went wide. Kira's voice was breaking now, years of buried anguish spilling out. You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like. I know enough. Myra's voice carried infinite gentleness now. I know you tried to warn me. That night when you came to check on me, you left the door unlocked on purpose. Gave me the chance to run. Silence fell over the yard like snow. Even Knox Greer had gone still, his face pale with the realization that his most trusted enforcer had been sabotaging him. You saved my life, Mira continued. And now I want to save yours. Help me do that, Kira. Help me prove that we're stronger than what he made us. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Then, slowly, Kira Sloane stepped out from behind the oak tree. Her rifle was still in her hands, but it pointed toward the ground now. Tears tracked through the dust on her scarred cheeks. He said you'd replace me, she whispered. Said I was getting too old, too used up. Said he'd keep me around as long as I was useful. Then let's prove him wrong together. Mira held out her hand. Let's show him what happens when his victims stand united instead of divided. Knox Greer's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Enough of this sentiment. Kira, kill her now, or face the consequences. But something had shifted in the air. You could feel it like the change of seasons. Kira looked at her former master with eyes that had lost their fear. I quit, she said simply, and let the rifle fall from her hands. What happened next unfolded like a fever dream. Knox Greer screamed in rage and reached for his gun. Sheriff, Kingsley shouted a warning. The bounty hunters scattered, suddenly unwilling to face down an entire community for a man whose hold on power was crumbling before their eyes. Ronan surged forward, placing himself between Greer and Mira just as the rancher's pistol cleared leather. The two shots came almost simultaneously, Greer's wild with fury, Ronan's aimed with the precision of a man protecting everything he loved. When the smoke cleared, Knox Greer lay motionless in the dust, his dreams of ownership and control bleeding out into the Wyoming soil. Ronan stood over him, his smoking Colt steady in his hand. Some debts, he said quietly, can only be paid in justice. 6 months later, as autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Ronan found Mira in his garden, their garden now, tending the roses she'd planted in spring. Maisie played nearby with the barn cats, her laughter bright as morning bells. The Covington place came up for sale, Mira said without looking up from the blooms. Thought maybe Kira might like to make a fresh start there. Generous of you, Ronan said, settling beside her on the garden bench. After everything she put you through, she was as much a victim as I was. Maybe more. Myra's hands were gentle on the rose stems, coaxing beauty from what had once been barren ground. Besides, everyone deserves a chance to bloom where they're planted. Ronan watched his wife. They'd married in Judge Morrison's replacement's first official act, tend their growing paradise, and felt the last of his old wounds finally healing. Sometimes the best things grew from the darkest soil. Speaking of blooming, Mira said with a smile that could light up the darkest winter, I've got news that might interest you. The way she touched her still flat belly told him everything he needed to know. Their family was growing, their love taking root in ground that had once seemed barren as winter stone. From the house came Maisie's voice, calling them to supper, and the sound of home had never been sweeter. Well, if that don't beat all for a tale of love found in the most unlikely places. If this story warmed your heart like a campfire on a cold night, give it a like and tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from today?